Obvious thinking commonly leads to wrong judgments and wrong conclusions. Humphrey B. Neal. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Cult Life with me, your host, Robin Jackson. Very interesting show tonight. We'll be talking about misconceptions about cults. And I get this a lot. As you may well know, I'm a former Jehovah's Witness. And many times when I speak to people about my experience and I start labeling Jehovah's Witnesses as a cult, people are surprised. Due to the fact that there's this misconception about what a cult is and how the world commonly views cults. So we'll talk about that, today. And the first preconceived image and misconception that most people have of cults is that they are easy to spot. They wear weird clothes and live in communes. Now, this is, of course, only partly true, as some do actually fit this notion. And for the most part, cult members are everyday people, like you and I. They live in houses, eat the same food, dress like the rest of us. And the fact is that cult leaders do not want you to know that you are being recruited into a cult. The cult leaders, therefore, the normal ones that are blended within society, dress in a way that will put everybody at ease. I mean, dress like you and I, everyday people, and it's being relatable as one cult calls this technique being relatable, and it's part of a recruitment technique as well. The second misconception is that cults are full of weird, weak, and emotionally unstable people. Now, this is not true. Many intelligent, attractive, and skillful people are members of cults. And we look at celebrities like, Hollywood celebrities like the Tom Cruise, John Travolta's, Kirstie Alley, who've all become involved with cults, especially the cult of Scientology. These are, from the outset, from the outside looking in, these are normal people. And some of these celebrities and some of these people have actually been used to promote some of these controversial groups and to defend them. And we see that a lot with Scientology. And the very reason that they are used by these groups is because of the public adulation and respect that they enjoy. They are also often seen as role models and trendsetters. So in reality, all sorts of people are involved with cults. One of the few common threads is that these people are often recruited at a low point in their lives. And of course, most cults offer an escape route to salvation. Of course, they have this so-called special nod from God, as it were, handed out to their devotees, which, the normal Orthodox faiths, or so it is claimed, fails to supply. They are the sane ones, while the rest of us are, of course, the lunatics destined to be destroyed. The third misconception is that cults are just a bunch of religious nutcases. It is a common mistake people make, as we have seen in the previous discussions, a cult refers to any group that uses mind control and devious recruitment techniques. The belief system of a cult often becomes warped to become a container for these techniques. And of course, we live in a free society and people are free to believe what they want. However, most would agree that it is wrong for anyone to deceive and control other people. The fourth misconception is that Christians call all other groups cults. What this means is that if a group claims to be a Christian and yet teaches something fundamentally different from the Bible, that group is classified as a cult. Now, I don't use that definition at all. I'd rather, I concentrate on the similarities across a broad spectrum of cults, whether their fundamental belief system be Christian, Jewish, Islamic, or whatever else. And as I've stated before, I intend to expose the common techniques used by all of these groups, no matter what their belief system or the basis for their belief system is. And this is what identifies them as cults. Tom Wolfe, who was an American writer and a journalist, wrote that a cult is a religion with no political power. He definitely, in my opinion, misunderstood the nature of the organism, for in reality, little could be further from the truth. I mean, cults wield considerable power. 800 years ago, the entire political stability of southern France, as an example, was threatened by the Catharists. And theirs was not an isolated phenomenon from history. If we look fast forward to our modern day 21st century, cults command a worldwide membership of over 10 million. And I speak specifically of the cult in Japan called Soka Gakkai. They command a worldwide membership of over 10 million. The largest of 180,000 registered sects in a country that lost its national religious identity at the end of World War II, when its emperor, believed by many to be a living god, was forced to announce and admit defeat over the radio. So that's an example of Japan. The Unification Church, the Moonies, owns a multi-billion-dollar business empire in America and openly voices global ambitions. The Watchtower organization, Jehovah's Witnesses, which now has their headquarters in America as well, used to be in Brooklyn, and they've since moved to a new premises, boasts a membership of more than close to 8 million now in my last count, or going by information that is supplied. They are $1 billion corporation. So, and we look at the Mormons. Have a few years ago they had a presidential candidate, and Mormonism, their membership also runs into close to 10 million worldwide. So while it can be said that some cults hold views outside of the norms of society, they don't necessarily pose a threat to members of the wider community. Cults such as the modern Druids do follow leaders and hold special ceremonies and rituals, but they work to improve the environment for everybody, and membership doesn't involve rejecting society's entire value system. And many of the misconceptions may also stem from the fact that most of these cult practices are very much shrouded in secrecy. And this has, of course, led to media campaigns warning of the supposed dangers of many of these groups. Our impressions of the activities of a lot of these secretive societies from our past are often colored by romanticism and an idealized view of history, but many of these groups had sinister beginnings and still have influence today. However, it is important to maintain a balance between paranoid conspiracy theories, which sees a world that is dominated to this day by corrupt and powerful groups such as the Illuminati and Freemasons, and a naive refusal to believe that cults have ever wielded great influence. So, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around a lot of groups. As I said, the theories around the so-called Illuminati and the Freemasons. So, because of this, no wonder that secretive organizations which believe they hold the key to the so-called New World Order or have the solutions to the problems of mankind have been treated with a lot of suspicion. So the question that very often arises is, doesn't the Constitution, and I speak specifically about the South African Constitution, protect the rights of these groups? Yes, it does. The Constitution of South Africa and many other countries does protect the rights of these groups in areas of freedom of religion and freedom of speech. However, it is not a blanket protection for any actions done in the name of their beliefs. If a group breaks the law, they are accountable for their actions just like everyone else. So the Constitution is not and should not be a suicide pact for these groups. And what many of these groups have forgotten is that the Constitution is expansive, especially in South Africa, and covers both their freedoms and the freedom of speech of their critics. Now, Africa has seen its fair share of cult activity, not only from cults crossing over from America and Europe, but from individual cults emerging on its own soil. And possibly the most deaths caused by a single cult that emerged from Africa are the deaths caused by the cult that was called the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments, a cult that emerged in Uganda a number of years ago. And just after the turn of the century, 780 bodies were found in a mass grave after a reign of terror that may have included murder and possibly mass suicide. So we're all familiar with Jonestown, but Africa has had their Jonestown as well when it came to the movement of the restoration of the Ten Commandments. So due to the group operating in isolation, many believe that all these bodies will never be recovered, and the death toll from this group could even eclipse that of Jonestown. In my view, the international cult that has caused the most deaths worldwide due to doctrine is the Jehovah's Witnesses. The ban on blood transfusions has caused many needless deaths for more than almost 60 to 70 years now. Organ transplants were also banned for a number of years by the witness leaders and were subsequently allowed in 1981. And throughout history, the search for the meaning of life has intrigued not only radical thinkers but ordinary people intent on broadening their horizons. So repeated studies continue to indicate a wide and varied background for cult recruits. So yes, I would say it's not only the weak, or so to speak, weak people that get drawn in. It's generally educated, strong people that get drawn into cults as well. So cults do not only emerge from the one spectrum of society, but also seem to flourish out of the economic and social difficulties that exist in countries. South Africa's northern neighbor, Zimbabwe, which is a country suffering immense political and social misery, has a classic example of where a cult emerged out of the need to redress the country's cataclysmic stress that it's been going through. In the remote Guruve region in Zimbabwe, 140 kilometers north of Harare, the girl Jesus saga was playing out. This girl Tespi was reportedly to be between at the time 11 and 13 years of age, and her parents were known as Baba Josepha and Maya Maria, are reportedly an offshoot of the Mudzimu cult led by the late Emmanuel Mudiwa, dubbed to be the Jesus of Chewishwe. And they religiously prophesied the birth of this girl as the third voice of Jesus. And a few years ago, Tespi even visited Harare with her parents to speak to Robert Mugabe, who was the president at the time. This was refused, and she subsequently went to the provincial governor's headquarters in Bandura. And although he was away at the time of her appearance there, it caused a massive stir among the townspeople, who were all desperate to catch a glimpse of this so-called girl Jesus. And it was then, after some reports, and after a while, that her followers were connected with the abduction of scores of children, and that the help of international agencies were being called in to help with the location, resettlement, and rehabilitation of a lot of these children. So families and people seeking prosperity had given money and little girls to the cult. And the children have shown signs of physical neglect and malnutrition. And of course, we all know how we've seen reports of a lot of these instances of childhood indoctrination, especially in South Africa as well. So in this example, people are willing to give up their children to the cult in return for prosperity under conditions in a country that needs to redress widespread social misery. So the membership of cultic groups maintain their attachment to their groups for a variety of reasons. So certainly not because they are too fragile or they are too weak or incapable of dealing with life outside it. These people are integrated into society and deal with life on the very same level as what a lot of non-members do. Although they have their cultic worldview guiding and shaping their responses to it. And many times it actually takes enormous amounts of personal courage and self-determination to remain committed to a lot of these groups, because it often puts them at odds and in opposition to, non-cult family members and friends. So they stay because they are persuaded and conditioned to believe that there are no other meaningful alternative places to go, outside the cult fold. And a lot of members, have family, friends, business associates, and personal attachments with the group that they won't break from very easily. They remain due to the systematically implanted mind control and misinformation and controlled behavior, and a lot of times blind trust in their group that they've been taught to express. So it's not because they are weak and spineless. Also, remember, no one deliberately sets out to join a cult. People don't consciously seek to join a cult. They become involved with what they think are sound churches or groups, be it religious, personal development churches, Bible groups, etc. But people seek to fulfill very legitimate needs, such as the search for meaning, a place in an apparently caring community, an exploration or ultimate life purpose. Seeking out the age-old question, why are we here? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? So those are heartfelt questions and needs, and some of these groups actually, as I said before, answer, have so-called authoritative answers to mankind's questions. So not because they really want to join these groups. It's many times these groups are people are drawn in because of seeking they're seeking truth and seeking for meaning and existence. And very often get fall trapped to a lot of spiritual deception, so to speak. And I'm going to leave you with this last misconception about cults. And this is that the cult leaders are openly worshipped as divine. you may find that, by loudly protesting that they don't worship their leaders but only give glory to God, cult members are actually covering up their actual practice. It's disingenuous. While these humble leaders of a cult give great lip service to worshipping the divine, be it God, Jehovah, or whatever their divine is, these leaders readily receive and expect honor from followers that actually borders on worship. Such veneration of these cult leaders as messengers who speak and act with infallibility, unquestionable positions of divine authority or ultimate wisdom, is a universal characteristic of cult authority structure. And I've seen this as a former Jehovah's Witness. The governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses are seen as the only sole channel of biblical truth, or seen as the only people that God actually speaks through. And the rank and file adhere to every utterance and every word that comes out of the governing body's mouths, their writings, their talks, their publications. Yes, they will tell you that you encounter a Jehovah's Witness on the street, they will tell you they do not worship these men. They worship Jehovah God. These men are only spokesperson. But if you actually look at the authority structure and how it is set up, these men are actually so-called infallible, and the rank and file hang on to every utterance and every written word that these men actually proclaim. So I hope that has cleared up some of the misconceptions about cults in general. It's a lot of these misconceptions. As I said at the beginning, I've received a lot of startled expressions and looks from people who are not too familiar with, especially the Jehovah's Witnesses, because they are, are blended into society and dress like you and I, go to work and are not isolated, so to speak. Do not live in communes. Don't dress in purple robes. Don't shave their heads. So I hope that has cleared up a bit of the misconceptions. And I thank you for joining me on today's show. It's been an interesting one. And I hope to see you or talk to you next week, where you can join me on Cult Life. Please follow me on Twitter at RobinJackson70. Check out my website, robinjackson.co.za. And just give us a like and a review on whichever platform you are listening to this podcast on, be it Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, or on YouTube. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, have a good one.